And I want to welcome everybody into the Fifth Dimension podcast with me, Evan McDermott, and I want to thank you for tuning into this episode. And on today's show, I want to talk about the concept of myths. And, myths are something that have truly shaped human culture, if you will, right? Through the years, through the generations, the centuries really, civilization was built on the idea of storytelling, the idea of tradition, and cultural myth. And through the years, different ways of living, different ways of being, they were first passed down orally before we had modern technologies. And, the idea of the myth, it's something that it lives in the unconscious in our society. And I say that because everybody has a personal myth, a personal story, a narrative that they live by, but so many fail to understand their own story, fail to understand who it is that they are and what it is they operate on, what it is that the premise of their unconscious operates with. Because ultimately, we are fueled by our unconscious. So much about spirituality and meditation is rewiring the subconscious mind to live in a place of peace, love, happiness, if you will, on a more consistent basis. And, I want to start out with this great Carl Jung quote because I feel like he captures this beautifully. Everybody acts out a myth, but very few people know what their myth is. And you should know what your myth is, because it might be a tragedy, and maybe you don't want it to be. Now, if we look at the exact definition of a myth, it's a traditional story, one concerning the history of people or explaining some sort of natural or social phenomenon, if you will. And if you look at the culture of our society, the basis of our society, we really have a way of being, an expected norm, if you will, a social phenomenon that we choose to operate on, we choose to organize ourselves by. And my question for you is, with this episode, what is your myth? Are you living by this societal norm? There's a good chance that you are. And the question isn't to degrade yourself because maybe you're living by the premises of our society. More the question is this myth beneficial to your own life? Is it beneficial to who you want to be here and now? And this unconscious myth that is living in society, it is being altered right now. It is being changed at a collective level based on the direction that we are heading in. And this could potentially lead to tragic consequences if people are not aware of it, if people don't make the choice as to what story they want to live by, right? Everybody is an intuitive being. Everybody knows what is right and wrong, for the most part, generally speaking. You all have a moral compass, and you try to follow your truth, your authenticity. But a big part of the world today is we do live in almost a victim culture. We take a lot of things personally. Even when we work on it, a lot of times we will make assumptions, judgments of others, and it's really been what's ingrained to us. Very much almost a rugged individualistic mentality, and there's certain benefits that have come from that, yet we do often find ourselves the victim in distressing situations, which leads to perpetuating cycles of fear, which leads to a lot of the hatred we see in the world. And it is stemming from this unconscious myth, this unconscious narrative that we tell ourselves about who we are, about how the world operates. And a lot of it, people sort of feel the world operates around them instead of them being a catalyst to the world and contributing. A lot of times people view it as they are the victims of the world, the victims of the situation. So I would analyze your situation and see where that might play into you, if that feels right, and think of times where things have happened and you play that sort of victim role, and what sort of work have you done to challenge that narrative, challenge that myth, and Another large part of our culture also comes in the form of materialism, right? And materialism has brought great things. We cannot deny that. It has brought comfort. It has brought wealth and prosperity for many. And this materialistic culture has given us the technologies that we have, that make this podcast possible, that make the World Wide Web possible. And it's really brought a lot of the premises of interconnectivity to a technological reality in terms of world connectivity. But we also look at materialism and see the negatives when we base our society around that. The myth of Western culture is materialism. It is consumption, the need for more. And a lot of times we hold on to that so rigidly. We hold on to it so tightly. And this is not just materialism in the sense of possessions. Yes, that is a huge line, but materialism, it bleeds into our thinking as well. It bleeds into the rational mind, the logic. And our brains are marvelous tools. Ultimately, the purpose of the brain is to find questions. It's to answer questions. It's to try and get a physical understanding of this world that we are living in. Because, yes, we are spiritual beings, but we are spiritual beings in a physical body, in a physical world. So, in this material thinking, a lot of times we try and define the world by that material, by that logic, by that rationality. And when we do this, and since our culture is based on this, and it has been for hundreds and hundreds of years, there's no denying that, this rationality, a lot of times we fail to question. We fail to question our own belief systems. We fail to question, is there more to the world that falls outside this material scope? And when we attach to these myths about our culture, when we really attach to these ideas that maybe there isn't more to the world and only my line of thinking is the correct line of thinking, this is where the tragedy comes into play. We look at events such as, I'm going to name a few, the Christian Crusades, or we look at Nazi Germany, we look at Soviet Russia, we look at Mao's China, the revolution there, where millions of people died. The reason those events are able to perpetuate is because we have to look at it from a psychological perspective. The people were fed a myth. They were fed a narrative about a specific way that the world operated. And, there's this quote that those who fail to understand history are the ones doomed to repeat it. I really think we need to expand that quote to say those who fail to understand the psychological premises of history, fail to understand the myth, the cultural phenomenon that was existent, are the ones who are doomed to repeat it. If you can begin to analyze the cultural phenomenon of Nazi Germany, if you can begin to analyze the psychology and how that was used in Nazi Germany, then we can begin to do the same thing to our own culture. What is the mythological narrative that is portrayed in Western society? And what is the dominant narrative right now in particular? And I think this is very relevant because we look at world events, right, such as the coronavirus. Everybody has their own opinions on it. Everybody has their own ideas. But the dominant narrative is one that cannot be questioned. It cannot be challenged. And I've had a few shows on the coronavirus and the Great Reset and sort of questioning what is this narrative that's being fed to us. If it was truly about health, why are we not emphasizing fitness and healthy eating and all of these different ideas? And I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I'm going to let you hold your own opinions. But when we fail to question it, we're subscribing to the narrative. We're subscribing to the myth. And anything that challenges that is deemed unworthy. In fact, it is ostracized. You cannot question it. And that's why there's so many people who are rigid in their belief systems in terms of not listening to people who don't want to wear a mask or don't want to take a vaccine. And, when you bring up facts and different scientific perspectives that challenge sort of the mainstream line, there's this ostracization. There's so much censorship around this right now. And, George R.R. Martin has a great quote about censorship inadvertently. I don't think he made it about censorship, but it's being used right now. When you cut out a man's tongue, it is not because they are lying, it's because you fear what they're saying. Now, I'm paraphrasing that quote a little bit, but you get where I'm coming from with that. In order to understand other perspectives and hear out different points of view, we really need to understand our own perspective. We really need to understand why it is we feel the way we do. Have I done my own research, or am I simply going along with the narrative that is being given to me? A lot of people simply don't have their own thoughts. They don't have a critical, original thinking. And it's because they're fed a narrative. And you need to be willing to look at both sides. But how does that start? It starts with looking within yourself to understand your own narrative, to understand your own myth. You need to understand, who am I on a deeper level? What is the basis of me? Where does my subconscious generate the actions that it gives out every single day? Where do my subconscious actions come from? Where do my ideas come from? And we need to start analyzing this and questioning it and be willing to ultimately change it. We need to embrace the idea that we are not perfect, myself included. There's so much that I still need to learn about myself, and it's truly a forever journey. But just the willingness, the openness to explore is that first step, and to understand our own myth, and to understand our own culture, and to be able to detach from the materialistic, rational thinking norm. Because we need to look at these ideas, we need to look at these world events from a larger perspective. And I'm going to say both sides are guilty of this. People really, really double down on their opinions instead of attempting to hear out what somebody else might have to say. And, instead of hearing them and listening and attempting to embody their perspective, this myth has taught that gaslighting and, ostracizing is okay on a personal level, when that's simply not. It is not okay to be doing those things, to completely disregard somebody's truth. This ultimately plays into the idea of karma. If you're fueling the narrative with more hate or fueling it with more division, you are only creating that because the pendulum swings. The karmic pendulum swings. So we need to be able to detach from the need to control, this possession, this, the material idea of possessions, right? It can be perfectly analyzed from a thinking standpoint. We have this possession over our thoughts, like over our ideas, and they need to be right. But when we hold on too tightly to that, it only causes problems. It only causes division. And that is where so many people stagnate. It's the need to hold on to their beliefs and the unwillingness to let them go when they're presented with new information, new facts that might challenge your belief systems. So what that leaves us with right now is every single individual ultimately has a choice. Everybody knows right from wrong, generally, from a moral standpoint. You know how you want to be treated. Let's put it that way. So when you're engaging in a discussion, you're engaging in some sort of, let's say, just conversation that is challenging your belief systems, how are you going to react? How are you going to respond? Reactions generally are emotional. We don't think about them. And a lot of times they stem from our unconscious myths, our unconscious belief systems. But a response is you challenging your own belief systems, hearing out what other people have to say, and a willingness to come together in unity despite differences that may be present. So every single individual has that choice and has to make that choice if we are going to come together. And right now, we need it more than ever. So many people on both sides of the aisle right now are simply living in fear. And fear is no place to be. We need to be living in a space of love for one another. We need to be living in a space of unity and inner peace so we can bring that to the collective. That's the only way. It has to start with the individual. It has to start with the individual. And so how does it start with the individual? It's by looking at your own myth, looking at your own psychology, and a willingness to reconnect with who you truly are, right? Come up with your own thoughts. Come up with your own thinking. Form an opinion that is different outside of the cultural norm, even if it's just slightly. Even if you agree with the myth that's being portrayed, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But you need to be willing to question it and continually question it. And ultimately, you need to reconnect with who it is you are. Reconnect with nature. You are an extension of nature. That is how we're all born. We're all animals. We have animalistic impulses, animalistic instincts that drive us, that drive the unconscious, but we also have this gift of self-awareness. And we are the only species that we know of that can truly analyze this connection and live in an interconnected state of unity, or live by this falsity, this illusion of separation that has been brought up. That is the ultimate myth of our time, the illusion of separation. So when you stand tall, stand strong in who it is you are, and authentically, not standing strong in the cultural narrative that was presented to you and just simply blindly accepting some sort of story that was told about you, but the idea that you are who you are on a deeper level, and you can intuitively make your own opinions, and you can intuitively come up with the solutions that this world needs. And the solutions are not going to come from this particular narrative. They're not going to come from this illusion of separation. The more we continue to double down on it, the worse things are going to get. And that's simply how it is. That's the nature of the beast, right? So you have to be willing to trust the inner flame that exists within to guide you on this journey. You know, as you begin to question the societal norm, the societal narrative, this culture that we live in, and start to see, you know, does this culture actually resonate with who I am? The more you begin to question that, the more pushback you may get. And I guarantee you will get pushback from others who are not willing to embark on this. And that's okay. That's okay. That's part of it. People challenging you in your newfound belief about the world. And that, you can view that one or two ways. We can go back to the choices again. You can react and actually return to your subconscious belief of disconnect, or you can respond mindfully in a space of love, unity, interconnectivity, allowing your intuition, allowing your heart to lead you to the truth, to lead you to authenticity. So trust the inner flame, trust the guidance system that's within to know what is true. You don't need to tell somebody to tell you whether you are right or wrong. Certainly there are facts that you need to look at, but you need to be willing to look past what somebody else is saying is true. Even if it's a large government institution saying this is truth, do not question it. You know, one of the things that made me most angry about this whole coronavirus is when, I believe it was Dr. Fauci came out and said, do not go and do your own research on the vaccine. And when somebody says something like that, you only can question it further. Why don't you want me doing my own research on this? What am I going to find that you cannot be so transparent about? Right? And like I said earlier in the show, hold your own belief on the vaccine. If you want to go and take it, that is up to you. That is fine. But you cannot gaslight others. You cannot spin your narrative, your falsehood of separation onto somebody else because it It triggers something within you. It triggers the myth, the folk tale of our culture. You need to be willing to question things and let others question things. Let others question your belief system. And, that is a challenge for you to explore your belief system further. And you will find either you were wrong, or you will only find more to confirm the fact that your heart and your intuition led you there. So this idea that we shouldn't be questioning things and having these tough conversations is simply a complete falsehood. It's a complete falsehood. Question everything. Everything needs to be questioned because we don't have the answers, but the answers come from questioning. And as we go along this journey, the fruits of prosperity, the fruits of abundance, they will come. They will come hand in hand. We will be walking together in light, in love, and living in a space of interconnectivity. But it starts with the individual. If you start doing this on an individual level, your own fruits of prosperity will come. Your own fruits of abundance will come. And what will happen is other people will see that and be drawn to do the same thing. You will become a guide, a mentor, a teacher for others to do the same, to learn about themselves, to question the norm, because you are living in abundance. You are living in prosperity. There is enough abundance to go around for this whole world. We are not overpopulated. That is a myth. We have enough abundance for everybody to self-actualize, for everybody to prosper. And when we do that, we are contributing to the evolution of humanity, which is why we are here. Everybody has a unique purpose that they can bring to the table. Everybody has that call to awakening within them, to be the intuitive being, to be the creative being that they innately are. But you need to be willing to question what it is that's been told about you, because what has been told about you is completely false. Nobody knows you but you. If we continue down the path of simply allowing these external forces to shape our narrative, to shape our own lives, without question, it is going to lead to more situations like Nazi Germany, like the Christian Crusades. And people wonder why these events happen. It's because people don't question things. It's because people are not willing to engage with the shadow. It's people aren't willing to engage with their own shadow, and that is why people are complicit. Jordan Peterson had a great point in that he said, and he took a lot of flack for this, but he's 100% right. If you were born in Nazi Germany, chances are you would be a Nazi. And he said that because, like then, people now do not question things. They don't question the authority, and a lot of times it comes from fear. It comes from the fear of knowing that this myth of culture, this story, is false. It's a complete misconception. This culture can be a widely held belief. This can be a massive belief system, but it can be false. Just because everybody is saying something does not mean it is true. And that will always be truth, that statement. Always question everything. Question what direction you are being led in. Are you being led off a cliff, or are you being led to light and love? And if you let external forces dictate that, there's a good chance you are being led off a cliff. So think about that. Think about who it is you are. Think about how you want to manifest your truth in this world. And does your surrounding external forces that are contributing to your life aid you in discovering your truth, putting your purpose into action, and ultimately creating a world that is run on the premises of love and unity and healing? Because that is what we need in this world right now. I think everybody can agree with that. We need unity. Well, how do we find it? You find unity within yourself. To see yourself in every other being, and to hear and listen to other perspectives, to embody other perspectives. Question your own personal narrative. Question who you are. Question everything. It's so vital. It's so essential. And that is what we need right now. So that's going to wrap up this episode. do continue to question. Keep looking inward. And, you know, you will be on the path to self-actualization by doing so. I can promise you that. So, if you're a fan of the show, be sure to leave us a rating, press subscribe, 5-star rating if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you feel that way about us. I love you. But don't let me guide you on that. Do your own thing. Question the show. Question everything. So, if you feel called, that social interaction with us is how more people will find the show, how we can create this world of love and unity so more people can hear these ideas. So if you're a fan, do us that favor. Leave that social interaction. You can also find us on social media at the Fifth Dimension Podcast, on Instagram, and also at Evan McDermott. And do head on over to evanmcdermott.org. If you want to work with me one-on-one, I just launched a wonderful 4-week transformation program, soul purpose healing, reconnecting you with who you are. And I'm really excited to get to work with a few of you on that. So if you feel called, head on over to evanmcdermott.org, press that Get Started button, and see what options are best for you. That's going to wrap up the show. Do subscribe because we have some great interviews coming up that I'm really excited to get out there. We'll be conducting them later this week. And until then, I'll see you next time. So long.